Okay, do you have any question?
Yes.
Do you have any question?
Yes.
Okay, what is your
About
question? Hello.
paraphrasing and summarizing. We write it without number page, and paraphrasing and summarizing and quoting. Date of publication is يعني is important صح؟ يعني we must write it.
You have to say quoting and summarizing, not summary, summarizing. Summary is a noun, summarize is a verb,
I
summarizing
know.
is a gerund. You didn't say summarizing. I am correcting your
I
mistake.
No, I said paraphrasing, summarizing, and quoting. It is necessary to write the date of publication, and paraphrasing and summarizing, we write it without page number. Is it right or not?
If you are a language student, when you paraphrase and summarize, you don't have to mention the number of the page. You mention only the date of the publication of the text that you are paraphrasing or summarizing. If you
Yes.
are a literature student, in other words, if you are using the MLA style sheet, when you paraphrase, you have to mention the number of the page. Is it clear?
Yes.
Okay. Are you language or literature student?
Literature.
Literature. So you have to mention the number of the page. Whether you paraphrase or summarize or quote.
Yes. Then paraphrasing and summarizing and quoting. I need to write near them the date of publication كمان يعني مع ال number of page.
No. I gave you examples. And I sent you the examples by WhatsApp. I said language students should mention the date of the publication of the text followed by the number of the page. I said literature students should not mention the date of the publication. They mention only the number of the page, and your book uses the MLA style sheet. You have examples in the book. Why don't you look at them?
I looked at them, but I wasn't able to differentiate between the literature and the language students. So,
My dear Angel, the chapter which is written, writing the research paper, is written according to the MLA style sheet. In this chapter, you don't have examples related to the APA format. I am providing the language students with my own examples. Now, at the end of this chapter, you have something entitled APA documentation or APA style sheet. So the language students should read this part when they have to document.
yes.
Doctor?
Thanks.
Wait a minute. At the end of the quote, you as a literature student, you write within parentheses the family name of the author followed by the number of the page. You write, let's say, Shakespeare 35. And there should be a space, by the way, between Shakespeare and 35. If you are a language student, you write Shakespeare, comma, the date of publication, for example, 1980, comma, lowercase p, period 32. This is how you should document within parentheses.
Yes. Yes.
And in fact, if you mention the name of the author before the quote, you don't have to mention the name of the author within parentheses. For example, you may say, in Hamlet, comma, or let's say Sonnet 18. In Sonnet 18, here you have the title of the poem. Shakespeare says, you have the name of the author. So in the introduction to the quote, you have the title of the text that you are quoting, and you have the name of the author. So you write in Sonnet 18, Sonnet 18 should be written within quotation marks, comma, Shakespeare says, comma, then you quote. So till the judgment that yourself arise, slash, you live in this and dwell in lover's eyes, unquote. After the quote, you write within parentheses, let's say 30. This is page 30. If you are a literature student, you write 30 and a period after the parenthetical citation. If you are a language student, at the end of the quote, you write within parentheses the date of the publication of the text of the sonnet. Let's say you are using a book that was published in 1960. So within parentheses, you write 1960, comma, P, period, 30. Okay, this is one way. In Sonnet 18, you write the date of if you write it after the title, Shakespeare, comma, quote, so till the judgment that yourself arise, slash, you live in this and dwell in lovers. Wait a minute. Unquote. Yes.
We are not hearing you. We can't hear you, doctor.
Doctor, we can't
hear.
Yes, doctor.
Okay. Okay. Wait.
Because I guess the connection is poor.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so you write in Sonnet 18, comma, Shakespeare says, comma, quote, so till the judgment that yourself arise, slash, you live in this and dwell in lover's eyes. Now, if you are a literature student, you write the number of the page within parentheses, 30, period. This is for literature students, MLA. Language students should write the date of the publication, let's say 1960, comma, P 30. I will send it to you. Okay, did you receive it?
Yes, doctor.
Okay, so here you have, follow with me. In Sonnet 18, it is written within quotation marks because you have a poem. This is the title of a short poem. And you have comma after 18. Then Shakespeare says, okay, so this is what we call the introduction. In Sonnet 18, Shakespeare says, this is the introduction to the quote. So this is how you introduce a quote. So if you mention the name of the author in the introduction to the quote, you don't have to mention his name within parentheses, i.e. within the parenthetical citation. As I did here, I mentioned Shakespeare, therefore I wrote 30, which means the number of the page. This is the MLA. And since I didn't mention the date of the publication after the title, you as language students should write 1960. It is the date of the publication of the text, comma, lowercase t, dot 30. Is it clear to all now?
Yes, doctor.
Yes, doctor.
Okay, do you have any more questions?
Yes, doctor.
Okay, go on.
In the exam, is it possible for you to ask us to differentiate between MLA and APA styles, or we just
On
study?
the exam, literature students should use the MLA style sheet. And the language students should use the APA format. Okay? So those who are literature students should memorize the guidelines that the literature students should use, and the language students should memorize the APA guidelines. Is it clear?
Yes, doctor, clear.
Yes, doctor.
Okay, Ines, انت اللي سألتي. You asked the question.
Yes, doctor.
Okay? So I'm not asking you to memorize both. And on the exam, you have to write on the cover page of the exam APA or MLA. So next to the subject, you write principles of research, and within parentheses, you write APA or MLA to know that you are a language or a literature student. Okay, now concerning spacing after punctuation marks. Okay, so you have a period, a comma, a semicolon, a colon, or a dash. How are you going to space after these punctuation marks? Okay, first of all, there should be no space before any punctuation mark. Okay, so you write, let's say, the last word, you directly add the punctuation mark as if the punctuation mark were a letter of that word. So there is no space between a punctuation mark and the word that precedes, i.e. that comes before it. This is clear. Now, after the punctuation mark, there should be a space. Okay? Now, after a period, a comma, a semicolon, or a colon, the language students should skip one space. i.e. one click since you are typing on the computer. Okay, so according to the APA, there should be one space after every punctuation mark. Now, if you have a dash or a hyphen, you have no space before it or after it. Okay, so if you have a compound noun that is hyphenated, i.e. has a dash, so there shouldn't be a space after the hyphen or before the hyphen. And if you add a dash after a statement to give an explanation, there shouldn't be a space before the dash or after it. Okay, so this applies to language as well as to literature students. Okay, so when you have a dash, the language students and the literature students should not use a space before it or a space after it. Is it clear? Okay, now the literature students should have the following spacing: after a period, the literature students should skip 2 spaces. After a period, there should be 2 spaces, i.e. 2 clicks. After a comma, or a semicolon, or a colon, there should be 1 space. Is it clear?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Clear, doctor.
Okay. Now, when you mention the title of a text, be it a poem or an essay or an article or a chapter or a novel or a play or a book or a newspaper or a journal, you have to capitalize the initials of the words of the title. The initials, i.e. the first letter of every word. You have to capitalize the initials of the words of every title except the prepositions and the articles. Okay? Every word of the title should be capitalized.
Doctor, except preposition and what?
And articles, i.e. a, an, and that. I will give you an example. Write it down. A, this is an article. Portrait of the artist as a young man. This is the title of a novel written by James Joyce. Did you write it down?
Doctor, can you please repeat it?
A portrait of the artist as a young man. Okay, I sent it to you. Can you find it? Did you receive it?
Yes, doctor, we received it.
Okay, A is capitalized, right?
Yes.
You have to capitalize the article or the preposition if it occurs at the beginning of the title. Okay, so here the title starts with A, therefore I capitalized A. Portrait is a noun, it is capitalized. Of is a preposition, it is not capitalized. The article, it is not capitalized. Artist, it is a noun, it is capitalized. As, it is a preposition, it is not capitalized. A is a preposition, it is not capitalized. Young man. Adjective and noun, they are capitalized. Okay? In other words, nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs, and pronouns are always capitalized. Yes, a pronoun should be capitalized. Articles and prepositions are not capitalized. This applies to language and to literature students. Okay, so when you mention the title in the body of your research paper, you have to capitalize the words of the title except the articles and the prepositions. Okay? In addition to this, you have also got to capitalize the conjunctions, the coordinating conjunctions, and, or, but, so, yet, nor. Okay? These are coordinating conjunctions. They shouldn't be capitalized. Okay? But if they occur at the beginning of the title, they should be capitalized. Okay? And titles of articles, essays, short poems, short stories should be written within quotation marks. Okay? So this is the body of your research paper. Okay? So we are done with the research techniques that you have to draw on as you write the body of your research paper. Okay, so next week we will start discussing how to write lists of works cited or lists of references. And in this case, we will have slight changes, slight differences. Okay, so this is everything that is related to the body of your research. Okay, so review them over the weekend try to go over the material that we have covered so far, so that you will master the techniques that you have to use when you write the body of the research paper. Okay? So when we start discussing the bibliography notes, we will have some changes, especially when we use the APA format. Okay? When we use the MLA style sheet, we will have no changes. Okay? So what we have for the body, we have it for the bibliography notes, but the APA format has slight differences. Okay? So you better memorize the techniques before we start discussing how to write a list of references or a list of works cited next week. Do you have any questions so far? Okay, good. Okay, did you read Gandhi?
Yes, doctor, we do.
Yes, doctor.
What is it all about?
Can I tell you?
Yes, go on.
Yes, doctor, thank you. Sylvia Plath's voice here represents the woman's voice in patriarchal society, where men have the authority and power over them. The title Daddy shows that the adult lady addresses her father with childish words. Plath writes about her father after his death. She doesn't miss him as a new daughter who had lost her father, but
Yes.
instead she wishes that she could kill him before he passed away. This highlights her agony because of his violence. She described him as a devil. Black color is used twice, the color of his shoes and the color of his heart. In the first and the last stanzas, this means that she opens and closes the poem with fear and darkness. Since you taught us in mythology, this is a symbol of colors, black symbol of fear, death, aggression. It's also a symbol of grief that the young lady suffers from. Also, I want to say something about the vampire. The vampire here represents the male figures in the poem, her father and her husband, who are considered a source of horror for Plath. So we imagine her as a small object, according to her father, who is a scary figure. This shows that victim of gender in patriarchal society. Thank you, doctor.
Yes, not at all. Who else? Thank you all.
Can I, doctor?
Yes, doctor.
Yes. Okay, go on.
Okay, she suffers after her father died, and she wanted to be with him, as if she committed suicide. And here she addressing both her father and her husband. She couldn't be separated from them till at the end she did it, and she becomes independent.
Yes. How does she get independent? Okay,
She
someone
never
else said,
depends on them.
what? Okay. Now, Gandhi is similar to Perga. The protagonist of the poem shows her agony and suffering as a result of living in a patriarchal society. Okay, so she describes how women are persecuted and oppressed by the male figures of her society. She uses images, in other words, to express her own ideas, and this is what we call imagism. Yes, in modern literature, there came into being a literary movement called the Imagist movement. The Imagist movement started in 1913 with Ezra Pound. Ezra, E-Z-R-A, P-O-U-N-D. Ezra Pound is an American poet, and he is the father of the Imagist movement in modern poetry. The movement started in 1913, and its main tenets, its main precepts include using images to express ideas and feelings. Therefore, Ezra Pound defines an image as a concrete object that stands for an idea or a feeling. This is Ezra Pound's definition of an image. Okay, so Ezra Pound is one of the major modern American poets. In fact, he is the major American poet who influenced the poets who were writing at the beginning of the 20th century. Ezra Pound doesn't believe in abstract images. Ezra Pound believes that the image should be a concrete object, i.e. something that you can see, that you can touch. Okay, so the image should be a concrete object that stands for something that is abstract. Okay, so ideas are abstract, thoughts are abstract, feelings and emotions are abstract. Okay, so here modern poetry departs or differs from traditional poetry. Okay, so in a traditional poem you may have a lot of abstractions. In modern poetry that is written according to the modern techniques of writing poetry is completely different. And it is highly complicated, and it is highly difficult to understand simply because the poets used concrete objects to express their ideas and feelings. Okay, so this is the Imagist movement. So one of the tenets of the Imagist movement is to draw on concrete images to express abstract ideas and feelings. Another precept of the Imagist movement is writing short lines. So the line should be short. It should be concise. And it should express the idea perfectly. Okay? And Ezra Pound believes that the poet should not overuse adjectives, descriptions. Okay? So adjectives and descriptions coincide with abstractions. I will give you an example. You may say, I am highly exhausted. I am highly tired. Okay, so here you directly tell me that you are tired. Now, if you were writing a poem, you may use a concrete image to suggest that you are tired. For example, Wilfred Owen, W-I-L-F-R-E-D, Wilfred Owen, O-W-E-N. In one of his war poems, describes the exhaustion of the soldiers. He says, bent double, knock, kneed. Okay, so bent double and knock kneed show that the soldiers are tired and exhausted.
Doctor, يعني we don't use adjectives.
Don't overuse adjectives according to Ezra Pound. I'm not saying that you don't have to do it. This is his own philosophy. It's up to you. You want to write poetry according to your own view of writing poetry, it's up to you. So I am explaining to you the principles of imagism because these principles apply to Sylvia Plath's poems, to Daddy as well as to Brenda. Okay? So Sylvia Plath expresses her own ideas through concrete images. Okay? So jade, it is a concrete object. And we know that a jade is a precious stone, so she compares herself to a jade to say that, according to the patriarchal figure, the female figure is a precious possession of the male figure. Okay? So instead of saying that, I am a woman possessed by my husband, Sylvia Plath says jade, the green stone of the agonized side of green Adam. I sit cross-legged, enigmatic. Right? He says, I gleam like a mirror. A mirror is a concrete object. And a mirror reflects what stands before it. So you see in the mirror your own reflection. Right? So the mirror is a concrete object. That means that the woman should act according to the conventions of her society. She is a reflection, a mirror of the conventions of her society. Is it clear?
Yes, Doctor.
Yes, it's clear.
Right? So the poem is a feminist poem. And the approach to analyzing the poem is the feminist literary theory, as I told you last session. Okay, so the methodology to analyzing this poem is the feminist theory. So if you were supposed to write a research paper on this poem, the methodology that you have to adopt should be the feminist approach, and you have to define feminism as a literary movement in your research paper. Is it clear?
Yes, doctor.
Okay. You have asked me about not using images. Are you convinced now? Did you understand the concept No answer. Anyway, I have to tell you one thing. Poetry doesn't tell. It doesn't tell you directly what the poet wants to say. Poetry suggests, i.e., it gives you hints as to what the poet is trying to say. I will start discussing the poems. So the number of the attendees is decreasing. We started off with 50 students, now I have 43. Daddy?
Doctor,
Yes. Okay, go on.
but the usage of concrete images should make the poem easier for understanding, not harder.
Okay, I'm talking about modern poetry, Ines. And even if you have images, the images should not be taken at the literal level. Right? Okay? Can you give me an example of an image that helps you understand a poem easily, since you raised the issue?
Example in Purda.
In what?
In Purda, when we understand the image of mirror and jade, it makes us understand it better.
But if you read the poem on your own, would you be able to understand it as I did 2 weeks ago?
Depending on the background knowledge, right?
Should know how to analyze the images. Okay? Anyway, later on we will read 3 or 4 poems by Emily Dickinson. And these poems are highly imagist. Okay, if you want, I will send them to you over the weekend. Read them and try to understand what she wants to say. Okay, Daddy,
Okay, doctor.
you do not do any more black shoe, in which I have lived like a foot for 30 years, poor and white, barely daring to breathe or chew. Daddy, I have had to kill you. You died before I had time. Marble heavy, a bag full of God, ghastly statue with one grey toe, big as a Frisco seal, and a head in the freakish Atlantic, where it pours being green over blue in the waters of beautiful Nauset. I used to pray to recover you at 2. Okay, let us go back to the first stanza. You do not do any more black shoe, in which I have lived like a foot for 30 years, poor and white, barely daring to breathe or chew. What does he want to say here?
Her father.
She's
Okay,
resembling her father to a shoe and herself to a foot.
she compares her father to a black shoe and herself
To the foot.
to the foot. What does it mean?
She used to treat, he used to treat her as his shoes.
Doctor, you mean the first stanza?
Yes, I'm referring to the first stanza.
Doctor, she describes him as a shoe, which she wears still, used to wear like a foot for 30 years. She describes him as a black one, black shoe, to describe the darkness or the...
Okay.
She is
You do
imprisoned
not
in
do.
this shoe.
Doctor, can I answer?
Yes, okay, go on.
I think she's been living for 30 years in such atmospheres, such dark atmospheres. She can't find the light in the darkness that she's living in. That doesn't mean literally that she's living using this black shoe. What she means by this, that she's living in darkness and she can't get out of it.
What kind of darkness?
The darkness of suffering caused by her father.
Okay, now the father represents the patriarchal authority of her society.
Yes.
Okay, so her daddy is symbolic of the patriarchal, of the authority of her patriarchal society. Okay, so that's why she says you do not do any more black shoe in which I have lived like a foot for 30 years. Okay, so here her father is compared not to a black shoe, he is compared to a shoemaker. Okay, so her father makes shoes and she compares herself to a foot in a shoe. Okay, so her father as a patriarchal figure represents the patriarchal principles of her society. And according to this society, the female figure should abide by the instructions of her society. Okay? So she compares herself to a foot within a shoe. Okay? So this means that as a woman, she is controlled by the conventions of her patriarchal society. Okay, so she starts the poem saying, you do not do any more black shoe in which I have lived like a foot for 30 years, poor and white, barely daring to breathe or a chew. After 30 years of living as a woman controlled by her patriarchal society, she liberates herself from this society. And she tells us how she liberates herself at the end of the poem. Okay? So the black shoe here is symbolic of the principles of the patriarchal society that constrain, that control the behavior of the woman. So that's why she says, in which I have lived like a foot for 30 years, poor and white, barely daring to breathe or a chew. She is hardly living.
She's not seeing the sun.
What?
She is white and poor, as if she's not seeing the sun.
Okay. So she is imprisoned within the conventions of her society. So the conventions of her society are there to control her. So that's why she says, I am a foot in a shoe. So the shoe should fit the foot. Okay? So her freedom is incarcerated, is imprisoned within the constraints of her patriarchal society. Okay? So at the end, she has liberated herself from this way of living. So that's why I said, you do not do any more black shoe in which I have lived like a foot for 30 years. So this means that she has rebelled against her patriarchal society at the age of 30. And we know that Sylvia Plath attempted to commit suicide twice. The first time she tried to commit suicide at the age of 20, and she was rescued. The second time she committed suicide at the age of 33 or 32, if I am not mistaken. At the age of 31, she was born in 1932. She committed suicide in 1963. So she committed suicide at the age of 31. Daddy, I have had to kill you. Therefore, by killing her father literally, she destroys the patriarchal conventions of her society metaphorically. Okay? So by killing her father, she liberates herself from oppression. Okay? So daddy or the father is a symbol of the patriarchal figure of her society. Daddy, I have had to kill you. You died before I had time. Yes, he died when she was 10 years old. Marble heavy. A bag full of art. Ghastly statue with one grey toe, big as a Frisco seal, and a head in the freakish Atlantic, with force being taken over blue waters of beautiful closet. What does this mean? She is describing her father. You died before I had time, then you have a dash, and after the dash, you have an explanation. This is how we use a dash. So when you use a dash, it means that you are going to introduce an explanation. Marble heavy. A bag full of God. Ghastly statue with one grey toe, big as a Frisco seal. So she is describing her father physically. So her father has a strong physical build-up. He is a bag full of God. What does it mean? So God, father or her father as a patriarchal figure is a bag full of rules and conventions. So that's why she compares him to God. So God gives dictates to people or instructions to people on how to live or to act. So her father is a God who dictates his social conventions to his daughter. Okay? So in other words, he is a God like figure that controls her life as a woman. Ghastly statue with one gray toe. Her father died of diabetes. And that one gray toe that is big as a Frisco seal is a reference to one of her father's toes. Her father suffered from gangrene, and we know that gangrene is one of the complications of diabetes. Okay, her father died of diabetes, so that's why she says ghastly statue with one gray toe, big as a Frisco seal, and a head in the freakish Atlantic, where it pours bean green over blue in the waters of beautiful Nauset. I want to comment on being green and on blue. Okay, so her father, now the green color here is a symbol of death. It's not a symbol of nature. It's not a symbol of life. So the green color here is a symbol of death and decay, D-E-C-A-Y. And blue is the color of tranquility, peace of mind. So her father, as a male figure, poisons the lives of women. This is what she wants to say. Okay, so the green color is suggestive of death and destruction. The blue color is a symbol of tranquility and peace of mind. Okay, and we know that the water is related to the world of women. So her father, who stands for the patriarchal figure, poisons and destroys the lives of women. Okay, so she uses the imagery of green to suggest the atmosphere of death and suffocation that women live in their patriarchal society. I used to pray to recover you, Achdu. Achdu, these are German words. And she wanted to recover her father. She wanted to bring him back to life, to kill him again. So she wants to avenge herself on her father. Therefore, by avenging herself on her father, she avenges herself on the patriarchal figures of her society. Yes, she wants to take revenge on her patriarchal society that has deprived her of her life as well as of her identity as a woman. Okay, Achdu, it means are you, and this is a reference to her father's German origin. And we know that Sylvia Plath is an American poetess of German origin. In the German tongue, in the Polish town, scraped flat by the roller of wars. But the name of the town is common. My Polak friend says there are a dozen or two. So I never could tell where you put your foot. You wrote, I never could talk to you. The tongue stuck in my jaw. Okay, so this means that her father is of German origin, although he was born in Poland. He died and he was buried in a certain city in Poland. This is what the stanza means. And the city was destroyed by the war. So I never could tell where you put your foot, your root. I never could talk to you. The tongue stuck in my jaw. So this means that the lady couldn't have the freedom to express herself in her patriarchal society. So that's why she says, I never could talk to you. She couldn't talk to her father while he was alive. The tongue stuck in my jaw. It stuck in a barbed wire snare. Itch, 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 itch. I. I could hardly speak. I thought every German was you. And the language obscene, an engine chuffing me off like a Jew. So here we have a reference to Nazism, Nazism, and to the Jews. Okay, so here Sylvia Plath uses the term German to describe every man. Why? You may have read about Hitler in your history courses at school. Hitler considered the German race superior to all other races, and the Germans belonged to what we call the Aryan race. A-R-Y-A-N. The Aryan race. Okay, so Hitler considered his race superior to all races. That's why he believed that the Aryan race should control all races. He should control the universe. So that's why Hitler embarked on the mission of controlling the world during World War I. Now Sylvia Plath makes this Hitlerian philosophy, Hitlerian, i.e. the philosophy of Hitler, in writing the poem. So she uses the term German to stand for the man who considers himself superior to the woman. So the man is German and the woman is a Jew. And we know that the Jews were persecuted by Hitler. Hitler considered the Jews as belonging to an inferior race. Okay? So she draws her images from the philosophy of Nazism. So every male figure is a German figure, is a Nazi who likes to persecute and to oppress others. So in this case, the patriarchal figure likes to oppress and persecute women. And women are compared to Jews. So they are inferior to the male figures. That's why they should be oppressed by their patriarchal society. Is it clear?
Yes, it's very clear. Thank you.
Yes, Dr. Bassad, can you repeat
What?
your reference to what?
I didn't
I didn't hear well.
hear you well.
You said
I said
here there is
Sylvia.
a reference.
Okay. You want me to repeat something? I said Sylvia Plath draws on the philosophy of Nazism to highlight the relationship between the male and the female figures in a patriarchal society. The male figure is compared to a Nazi, i.e. to a German, because he, i.e. the male figure, sees himself superior to women. So this means that the male figure believes that he has to persecute and to oppress the female figure simply because the female figure belongs to a lower race, i.e. simply because women are inferior to men, they are not equal. Okay? So there is a sense of superiority. The males are superior to women. So that's why she describes the male figures as Nazi figures, and she describes women as Jews, and we know that the Jews were hated, were abhorred, were looked down on, were despised, were persecuted by Hitler, i.e. by Nazism. So the woman is like a Jew. She is to be persecuted and oppressed by the male figures of her society. A Jew to Dachau, Auschwitz, Belsen. These are concentration camps. Okay? So the Jews were persecuted and murdered by the Nazis, and they were sent to persecution camps. These are camps that the enemies of the Nazis were sent to. So the lady compares herself to a Jew who has been sent to the concentration camps where she is persecuted by the male figures of her society. I began to talk like a Jew. I think I may well be a Jew. I will leave the discussion at this point. I will explain the rest of the poem next Tuesday. Do you have any question before I dismiss the class?
Doctor,
No, thank you, doctor.
Huh?
Can I ask you something, Doctor?
Okay, go on.
So the oppression of the Jews have affected her psychologically?
I'm not saying that the persecution of the Jews has affected her negatively. No, she compares herself to a Jew who is persecuted Nazi. So in this case, the Nazi is the male figure of her society, the patriarchal figure, and the Jew is the female figure. Is it clear now?
Yes, Doctor, thank you.
Okay. Any more questions?
No, thank you, doctor.
Okay, we will meet next
No,
week.
thank you.
Okay, thank you. We will meet next week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Thank you, Doctor.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.